Oh, this is perfect. Line number 1. Hi, James. You're on the air.
How you doing, Paddy?
Best kind, man. How you doing?
Not too bad. Heard you talking about I guess one of my comments, maybe possibly from Twitter.
It was, yeah.
About your propaganda machine.
And that's why you're a good fella, because you called in immediately to have a chat. So let's go ahead. You go ahead and elaborate on your issue.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before with another question.
Yep.
I see this, the question of the day, it's great for generating conversation. It's great for making talk. My problem with it is you allow it to be manipulated, and then the next day you report it as news. And I feel like as a news entity who reaches the masses in Newfoundland and Labrador, that this can be used as a tool to sway public opinion, especially, I mean, if you look at it there now, you're looking at 75 some odd percent that is for this. I mean, if you believe that somebody in Nova Scotia, maybe here, anywhere, anyone who has an interest in swaying the public, and then you report it as news the next day, basically you're creating that tool.
James, you are making a mountain out of a molehill, and you know it.
I don't think so.
Swaying public opinion. Listen, we're not going to the polls next week, James. The polls closed 3 months ago. The public have spoken. In they go. This is a generation of conversation, online question of the day. Every single news outlet in the world who does this does not make you sign in with an email address so you can click a button, yes or no. It is what it is. People who take it too serious are just going to have to get over it.
But you can actually apply, and I've made comments. I make my vote when I see it every day.
Yep.
I make my vote, and then there's a little why or why not. I've made my comments, and then I've also tagged on actual ways that you can basically legitimize it by applying geolocators, IP address. Make one IP address allow you to vote once. I mean, simple things like this that can make it just a tiny bit more scientific, maybe not ideally scientific, but just a tiny bit more scientific.
But where does that get you or anyone else if it's a tiny bit more scientific? Like, what is the benefit to you in particular who has a distinct problem with it, James? And for starters, to accuse us of being a propaganda machine, you're way off base, my son. There's lefties and righties running around this building. You don't know who's up next. Whoever gets to talk gets to talk.
And I'm not accusing anybody in the building of being, you know, conspiracy in the back corner figuring it out. But what I'm saying is, basically, this is a tool. And, I mean, if, like I said, somebody up in Nova Scotia who's, you know, wants this deal to sway a certain way, wants to sit down and click on the computer from one IP address a couple of thousand times to sway the public here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
But sway the public for what, though? There's my thing, though, James. What are we going to... Whose opinion are we going to sway for any... Who's going to have any impact here? Like, whether you're the loser sitting in an office clicking it 2,000 times, or people are reading it and taking it as gospel truth, what impact is yet to be had on Muskrat Falls? Well, do you think 75% of people agree with the MOU?
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm not going to say if I'm for or against Muskrat Falls. That's not my position to say right now. But if you look at the elections, 50% of people did not vote.
Yep.
If you do some very simple, basic math, and I mean, like I said, it's not scientific, the government that's in power right now only really represents 1/3 of 50% of people in Newfoundland and Labrador.
They got the lowest popular vote of a governing party in the history of the province.
So how is it that, like I said, this type of
it was to do with 50% of people voting.
Propaganda machine.
But what do people have? You know, whether or not people voted has got nothing to do with the Telegram, CBC, VOCM, anybody else in this world. Why?
Because when you are the news agency who are providing the issue,
right,
and you're allowing it to be swayed in certain ways, people can see this and get disheartened.
But
I mean,
get disheartened. You know what they should do, James? Is that they should grow up and haul their thumb out of their mouth or move out of mommy's basement and go vote.
See, and I think
that's pathetic. I mean, what a pathetic reason to offer is that someone heard the news and said, well, Christ, the Tories are going to be the majority. I'm not voting. That's the dumbest thing of all time.
I disagree. And I think for you to classify people as the grow up and get out of their mother's basement...
If your reason for not voting is that you heard someone on the news say that Muskrat Falls is going ahead, then that is stupid and pathetic, and they should grow up and go vote.
You're taking words out of my mouth now. I did not say that in any way.
Then you go ahead and say whatever.
And I'm not saying that it's specifically about Muskrat Falls. You have a different question every single day. And depending on the question, you can have parties who have an interest in swaying the vote. Now, if you were saying that VOCM doesn't reach the masses of Newfoundland and Labrador,
we do,
and doesn't have an effect on possibly, maybe giving them information on how they should and should think.
Of course we do.
Exactly. So, I mean, if this is an issue of propaganda, which I'm trying to stay away from.
You can say whatever you like,
providing
James.
that tool.
You're a big boy, and you had the guts to call, which makes you a good guy. Listen, people will take some information and be swayed one way or another when they listen to Randy or Bill or me and hear a conversation with points offered on either side, like a legitimate adult might do. But if you're going to go on the question of the day and base whether or not you're going to get off the couch and go vote on election day based on the results of what we know some loser in some office or under some rock can be clicking it relentlessly, then that person is looking for a reason not to vote, and they cannot blame it on anyone but themselves.
Well, I personally believe that you, as an agency, not necessarily you, but VOCM as an agency, has an ethical responsibility to provide news. And when you report this as news, that's where you're on that fine line of ethics where I see this as swaying
VOCM.
over.
My God, look at the other outlets. And I'm not in the business of damning any other outlet because I couldn't be bothered. We open up the phone lines. Yes, I know you do. We open up the phone lines. You can say out loud, live, unedited, uninterrupted, what you think about whatever. I mean, and that's liberals and Tories and dippers and everybody. Like, whoever wants to talk, fill your boots.
And I think that's great. It's great that we have the opportunity to do that. Now, all I see is basically with some simple changes that there could be some validity put to the question. And maybe when you do report it every afternoon, that it would have some weight to it then. And when people do actually look at this and take this piece of information as a part of what they want to basically put into their interpretation of how they should or shouldn't do things, I think that will be a step closer to actually being reasonable and valid.
You have documented your concerns. I understand them.
And I will continue to until, I mean, honestly, I feel, I personally feel like I will continue to call it a propaganda machine until it changes.
Well, there you go. It took you 7.5 minutes to drum up the courage that you had on Twitter. You'll continue to call us a propaganda machine until at a time infinitum. But that's fine, James. What I'm telling you is that whoever is going to take that info or use whatever pathetic reason is offered by you read a news story in some lefty newspaper, righty newspaper, heard a comment from Bill or Randy or me or Kelvin Parsons, or if that's your reason or rationale for not voting, then that person is a far bigger part of the problem than they could ever possibly be in contributing to a solution. The way we have validated people's option to vote not at all, or to get in the ballot cardboard box and vote none of the above, is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Period.
Well,
go vote.
I mean, you're saying that 50% of Newfoundlanders are stupid.
I'm saying 50% of people in Newfoundland who didn't vote were looking for a reason not to vote. And when the bulk of the reason they didn't vote is because they chose to be uninformed, couldn't be bothered, looking for an excuse to not vote, that is not my problem, nor is the VOCM, CBC's, the Telegram, or anybody else.
Well, I see, when you're providing the information, I see it as an issue of you're providing the information, and maybe people have done their research. Maybe people have actually gone to you guys.
And at that point, they decide, after all the Googling and researching and listening, they decide, you know what, I'm not voting.
Well, maybe they've decided that there's a different way of doing things, and basically, you can't say that they're stupid. You can't say that 50% of Newfoundland and Labradors.
You accuse me of twisting your words, and now you're doing the same thing to me, James. What I said, and let me summarize: if people are going to look for an excuse to not vote based on something they read or heard, as opposed to execute their civic duty to go vote, is not my problem. It's no news outlet's problem. It's their problem. That's what I said, and that's what I mean.
Researching the information that you, CBC, anybody who provides the information.
Compare and contrast.
Researching that.
Google her up and listen to a variety of shows. Do whatever you do to feel like you've been satisfactorily informed.
But instead of looking for a reason not to vote, maybe they found a reason not to vote.
Why? The question of the day. The people who are using that reason, I will say this though out loud, if reading the results of a question today on VOCM.com was ever anyone's justification in their own mind not to vote, that person will indeed qualify as stupid.
Well, I mean, maybe it's not just the question of the day. Maybe it's the simple fact that the information that's being provided is not valid. Maybe they're searching.
The news department does a great job. We take all sides on these shows. I can listen to any opinion offered on any issue. I let people have their say. I offer my opinion.
Yep.
People can digest it, absorb it, and treat it as they see fit.
And no way
So
am I criticizing the news department. I have called in to call the question of the day the propaganda machine that it is.
And James, I always appreciate the conversation. Call again anytime, my son.
All right.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye-bye. There we go. Good conversation and good fodder for our next chat about that. But listen, I stand by it. If you're looking for a reason not to vote, you don't need any news outlet to convince you that you're lazy enough to not get off the couch and go vote.